And I briefly discussed this with Abraham here a little bit. And Abraham came up with a scenario that he articulated about a Samoan that was doing debt collecting practices. But he would come into a room with a video camera. Abraham, are you still with us? Are you able to briefly share your description of how your Samoan friend with a few supporters and a video camera come in and basically really quickly and efficiently got compliance from everybody in the room? Abraham, are you able to articulate a little bit there?
Yeah, I had a security company in the Bronx, and we often put money out on the street where we would pay for the equipment and put it into commercial entities, you know, a repair garage or some other kind of business entity, and we would, you know, loan them money and buy the equipment, and then they would make us payments. And when they fell behind in payments, sometimes they thought they could get away with it because all they saw was me and my partner, so they figured they could play games. So we hired this very large Samoan who was a bodyguard for some very famous rap groups. Very smart guy. This guy was gigantic. And we hired him, and he was going to assist us in collections. And in those days, this is probably about 15 years ago, maybe 20, and he had a pen camera. And in those days, people knew about them, but you didn't really see it very often. And when he walked into in this case it was a parts store, an automotive parts store, and he walked into the parts store holding this pen camera up, as though it really wasn't recording, but they didn't know that. and he says, he starts quoting ordinance, and he starts quoting subsections of laws as he's walking into the thing, holding up this pen camera, and saying, oh, you know, all actions before me are being recorded to be used in a court of law. And then he starts quoting portions of the contract that we wrote, and he starts talking about if there's going to be an adverse action or if anybody's going to act unruly, it's being recorded by the pen camera, and it will be brought up in front of a judge. And by him carrying on this way, he entirely quelled any kind, because this is the Bronx, and the people can get very rowdy over there, and they would test you, and they would definitely test you. But the way this giant Samoan came out with that camera, he had everybody, it was very effective and extremely intimidating. And when I watched him do that, I thought, wow, this was absolutely brilliant. The way in which he used that pen camera to get total cooperation and get you could see the look on the faces of the people who were working in this place. You could tell they weren't going to try to pay us the money, but when they heard this guy go through with what he did, we certainly got paid, and we didn't have any kind of you know, aggressive resistance or in some way counter intimidation, because the way in which he moved forward with that pen camera, confident and quoting sections of regulations, it was just very powerful, very persuasive, and you could see immediately the effect it had in everything in front of him. And I think that maybe there's something there to take note of.
Thank you, Abraham. These motivated activists, when we can offer, when people come to us, they routinely ask us, well, how does your wonderful program, how is that of any benefit to me? Well, when we can tell them that our judicial officer can empower them to conduct a judicial investigation that can be engineered in manners that Abraham just described are being accomplished by Big Samoan or, you know, other people that come into a room with preferably at least 2 witnesses and a video camera running. Okay? And anybody can do this if they're basically a qualified elector and they've just got an issue that they want to get to the bottom of. If it's a looming court case that they might be involved in, they should probably have somebody more impartial take the point on that and pursue the issue, and they can just be one of the witnesses. You should have at least 2 witnesses supporting the point man. The point man should be basically a disinterested individual, but
Charles, I may add, Charles, that if you're going to move forward on a footing like that, you would have several qualified electors, several town constables, a couple of justices of the peace, some recording equipment, and you would have the right kind of identification and the right kind of costumes so that the entire effect comes to bear, that there is an executive office being brought to bear in that forum that's carrying weight and authority. So the whole thing will come together in an extremely congruent fashion.
Thank you. Yes, I'm a little bit apprehensive that some of our initial activists might not have the 5 or 6 people that you're describing. They'll probably be scraping. They might not be able to get 2 witnesses. It might just be 2 of them going in there, one of them backing up the other. And there's times where you just do what you can with what you got. But definitely, Abraham, it would be better to have a good group like that.
Realize the merit of this thing. When people realize the merit of this, and they can understand how its constituent components are put together, and the presence that it can summon, it would be so formidable. You would have a lot of people who'd want to join in just for the sheer enjoyment of being able to exert that kind of force and finally have an effect that's authoritative. I think you'll have more people than you suspect.
I thirst for days when exactly what you're describing here comes together, Brother Abraham. I think it's important here to reemphasize a point that you did touch on, and that I was getting to, is have the person that's leading this type of a judicial investigation that's referred to in the Oregon statute would want to have at least extra copies of important documents, at least 2 important documents there. One would be his identification as a qualified elector and member of the community, and the second would be the written and judicially signed judicial warrant, which has authorized and legitimized the judicial investigation which he is conducting. And once, like a county clerk or a city clerk, or a chief of police or a sheriff, once you put those documents in front of them, and other judicial officers, these judicial investigations can be brought to bear against other judicial officers. One judicial officer can review the proceedings of another judicial officer. It has profound implications. But yes, the 2 documents you would want to have, we need to stand in the light. They're the creatures of darkness. They're the ones that make silent presumptions whereunder they can usurp unjustified authority over our common people. We don't do that. We're at a higher level of law and spiritual and physical world accountability, and we present our personal identification of who the real flesh and blood man or woman is that's conducting this judicial investigation. Right here, staring at you, here's my identification card, and here's my warrant, and for conducting this judicial investigation, paper copy of it, signed and sealed by the judicial officer named therein. See what it says there? Want to take a second or 2 to read it? Yeah, we're here to conduct the judicial investigation. We need you to produce some records and books that you don't normally display to the public, or whatever other issue might be on the table. See, at that point, their lawyers are going to be screaming their hair out, and when the county clerks and the city clerks see the lawyers pulling their hair out, they're going to be inclined to just do what you say, just like Abraham was talking about. So I really think it's important that this general Section 3 of our agenda be comprehended for how much empowerment that we've got access to, and that we are, it's part of our responsible self-governing communities organizing effort here, that we are promoting through these conferences of this Supreme Court of Law. And that's pretty close to a conclusion there. Comments or questions, or anybody want to tell me I'm full of smoke here? I think I'll yield.
I also
yes.
wanted to, in remembering how that went down in that automotive store, because prior to us, putting this guy in check, he was brazen. He was very adamant about not paying. That he had no reason to pay. He was just very uncooperative. After the Samoan came at him with this process and procedure that he did, I actually felt bad for the business owner, right? Because he was saying, "I'm sorry, I apologize, I didn't mean anything by it," because the Samoan was so convincing, and the way he held that camera up, and the way in which he cited the rules and regulations that applied, and how everything in front of him was going to be recorded and being presented to a judge in a court of law, the guy started backpedaling so quickly, I was embarrassed for him. It was so effective. The guy capitulated, like he just fell like how does that go? Like a bad deck of cards. He just fell apart from being so formidably opposed to paying us to, whatever you say, whatever you want, just don't take this any further, because it was a very convincing argument that guy made. And he ad-libbed it. It wasn't even rehearsed. And I just wanted to add that because it was so effective that the guy, I felt bad for him because he became very apologetic and started backpedaling, and it was kind of shameful how quickly he folded. I thought he had more merit to him, as tough as he was sounding prior to this engagement.
Well, first and foremost, the Samoan obviously had a substantial presence, and he may have, even though he was being armed with knowledge and articulating it with explicit specificity, which was probably intimidating in and of itself, I reasonably suggest that the store Welcher probably perceived him to have the present ability to do him egregious bodily harm, at the very least.
That's what I thought of him as well. That's what I thought, because this guy looked very intimidating to begin with, but he was very soft-spoken. Somebody so big and so intimidating to be very soft-spoken. And it really wasn't his intimidating presence, because I was listening and watching. I'm a salesman by nature too, so I watch things around me very carefully. And I was watching him, and he had done this many times before in other situations, and I thought that I could have done it better than he did, and he had done this many times before, because being a very well trained salesman, I thought I could have did it much better with greater presence. And I don't think it was his intimidating size that did it, because the way in which this owner responded, it was to the merit of what was being said and the presence of that camera, and weighing out the facts that everything that he just said could end up in front of the law. In other words, they had several pit bulls behind that counter, and one time before they threatened to sick the dogs on us. So this was a very volatile situation, which is why we called, just in case it was going to turn into a fight, we brought that big Samoan with us. But after he did what he did, it was so technically cunning. It wasn't so much his big intimidating size as it was the words that he chose and the mannerisms which he demonstrated there that put everybody on edge and made them very fearful that they could all end up in court and end up in trouble, end up in jail. That was really what did it, not the fact that he was a big, strong dude.
Well, he was a formidable multi-level package, and there were a lot of different dynamic circumstances at play that urged his voluntary compliance quickly, I'm guessing.
So his big size certainly didn't hurt.